we are going to go to baseball. And Rob, I brought it up with Bip Roberts. You saw the study that came out that said it's by Tides, Tides, and they said that the percentage of African-American players on MLB opening day rosters was at an all-time low, at least since they've been doing the study, which started in 1991. 6.2%. Last year, it set an all-time low at 7.2%, but this year, 6.2%. When in your reporting, MLBBro.com, all that, when you talk to players, I remember CC Sabathia came out a few years ago and talked about it, and, brothers get lonely, and, you might be the only African-American on the team or something like that. What do guys in the league think about kind of the state of things right now in the NBA in regards to this?
Yeah. I mean, obviously you see the stats or the numbers and it doesn't feel good, but I've talked to players and coaches and especially Chris down in coaches in the minor leagues. We saw a couple things happen. The Major League Baseball draft that just came and went, the last draft, Chris, 3 of the top 5 players drafted were black. Never happened in the history of baseball. So that's a good sign. There's some movement as far as who's in the, who's coming up, where the prospects are that they're being searched for and recruited. Because we talked about this, Chris. One of the biggest issues was the showcases.
Yes.
Okay, we talked about it. To be a part of the showcase, you might need to pay $1,000 for a weekend to play in these games. And this is where these scouts are, Chris, and this is where they're looking for talent. That X's out a lot of people. Everybody doesn't have $1,000 for the weekend. That's just one showcase.
And that's just one. Exactly. You got guys going every weekend.
Every weekend to a showcase. Exactly. Okay. Trying to catch the eye of somebody. So those are things that are there. Have you talked to, or has anybody talked to MLB, or because that's not necessarily a racist situation in and of itself. No, it's a financial.
But what it does though is X out a lot of poor people, a lot of whom are African American or
Hispanic,
poor whites or Hispanic in this country.
Yep.
And so it does have racial implications, even as it may not be, a racist situation.
Right, and they're not in charge of the showcases, but that's where they're going to look for it. I don't know if you remember, Chris, a couple years ago, Rob G., you might remember this too. The coach of Michigan, his baseball team, you remember? That. And he had the interview, and he had, I want to say, and I might be exaggerating by 1 or 2, he had as many black players on the Michigan baseball team as they had on the Michigan basketball team. Obviously, Chris, there's not as many basketball players as there are baseball players. But the number, it was close. It was like 8 or 9.
Which is a ton.
Which is a baseball. Ton, especially for a team in the Midwest, in the Big Ten, like for real, 9 or 8 or 9 black baseball players. So they talked to the coach, and I remember during the game, and I think you were here, Chris. That was a couple of years ago.
We talked about it on the air.
You remember that? Yeah.
And then we did have the coach on. Yeah. The interview.
And he basically said, I decided to go looking elsewhere, and I wasn't just going to look in the showcases or whatever where these other kids are. And I was able to find kids, and they wound up going to, I think, the College World Series, Michigan. It was one of those stories, and he's long gone, Chris, because he got snapped up by a even bigger baseball program because he had so much success. But anyway, my point is that there's a lot of things in those circumstances that worked against some kids. And then the other part is how times have changed, and I think kids want stuff instantly. If you're an athlete and you could say, hey, I could go to high school, play 1 year, Chris, or whatever, go to college or 1 year, and then I'm in the NBA and I'm making millions of dollars. I should pour into that. You go to baseball, Chris, you might go to the minor leagues, you might not come up, you know what I mean? You might not make it. It ain't like it's automatic if you get drafted in baseball. It's just not. It's way harder because there's like all these steps you got to do. Whereas if you're a star athlete, and Kyler Murray's a perfect example. Kyler Murray's the first player ever drafted in the first round of the NFL and in Major League Baseball. That's incredible, Chris, as long as these games have been around. That Kyler Murray was the first. And he chose football. He's a star right away. He's already got his millions. Even though the A's offered him like $35 million, it ain't the NFL money, and he would have had to go to the minor leagues. So I think that works against baseball as well.
I think also, I mean, forget the majors, just playing in high school. If you're the star football player or star basketball player, you're the big man on campus.
No doubt.
Not necessarily if you're the star baseball player. You know, at the high school and college levels, baseball doesn't get the fanfare that football and basketball get.
Right.
So I think that's because look, I agree. I think the showcasing is a big problem. Obviously, you don't want, if you can help it. Some sports just cost a certain amount of money to play, and we get that because of equipment or whatever. But you don't want to X out players simply for financial reasons.
Right. It should be because they
just weren't good enough.
They just weren't good enough. Now you can live with that, but as we know, when you look through the baseball record books, there's nothing but black players, and we only started playing in 1947. So we know we could play baseball. That's not the issue.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing. The issue is not, you know. And look, my uncle. I remember talking with my uncle about this years ago. And I was saying, man, there are not many blacks playing baseball. He said, there's plenty of blacks playing baseball. He said, they're just blacks born in the Caribbean, you know, in South America and stuff. And it's true, you know, but in African Americans, because for all the other reasons, as you mentioned, the training academies down in South America, Latin America, the showcasing and all the other things, Rob, it is true that in our community, the black community, the interest in baseball has plummeted. I remember when I was growing up in Cincinnati, Ohio, which obviously is a big baseball. You had the Reds at the height of their powers in the 70s. And I lived in a black neighborhood. We all loved baseball and played. We just went from football to baseball or basketball to baseball. And I was really young, but we were playing baseball more than basketball at that point. And Indianapolis, I lived there, same situation. Basketball became huge, but, you know, we still were playing a lot of baseball too. And that interest just isn't there. Now, some of it, Rob, might also be that coaches or the sports themselves almost demand that you specialize now.
There you go, Chris.
Right? So if I play football, they won't let me play baseball in the summer.
They won't let you, and you notice in basketball, it's basketball 24/7, 365. And coaches won't, if you want to run track or be on some other team, they'll say you can't play for me.
Yep.
And that ain't fair. Now that's the part.
And that's not good for the athletes. Rob, I've interviewed pitchers on other shows years ago before we had the Odd Couple, and we've just heard some say that some of these pitchers think the reason that all these pitchers get injured is because they're pitching year round. They're not playing other sports and working other muscles.
Right. And I totally agree. I think the bad part about it is, Chris, is that there might be a talented basketball player who could play baseball as well or whatever, who might not make it in the NBA. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like you might not get a Division I scholarship, Chris, at a major college for basketball, but you might get a scholarship for baseball. You know, I mean, David Justice tells a story. He went to college, Chris, to play basketball. The coach
Where did he go?
A local school out in Ohio somewhere, like not a big name school, but a local school. And he said the coach was making them do the running the stairs, Chris. He was like, I'm not with this. Like that was really, the coach was just making them do that, and he said he hated it. He looked down at the baseball field.
Thomas More University.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Wow.
Yeah, in Kentucky. And he decided, Chris, he sees the baseball team practicing down on the field. And he decides to go down and ask, can he play?
He played in high school, I imagine.
Yeah.
Okay.
But he went there to play basketball.
Right.
And started playing. He told me there was a big game, a moment where some scouts came in to see another kid. He said he had 2 humongous home runs in the game out of the park. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And the scouts came over to him and said, dude, we need to talk. And he said that's what started his baseball career.
Right.
Was scouts seeing him deciding he didn't want to play basketball and picking up the bat and deciding to go forward. And so it's a lot of different variables, but I am encouraged by the draft. I'm encouraged by some of the teams and players that they have in the minors. They might not all make it. They might not all get up here, get to the big leagues. And then the other thing, Chris, for me, not baseball-wise, but me as an owner of the MLB Bro and starting this thing, and this is probably what warms my heart the most. I can't get over, I have a staff of 60 people. Most of them are young people. 40 of the 60 are young, in their 20s. And they all want to be a part of it. I get about 2 emails a week from kids in college who are in the business, or trying to get into the business or trying to learn, who want to be involved in MLB Bro. And that is encouraging to me. It's not like I don't have anybody who wants to do baseball or, you know what I mean, or no interest or nobody. To have 40 young people in their 20s, when you go to my website, go to the staff box and go look at all these faces. These are all people, and they love the game. They absolutely love it. So I'm encouraged by that kids in their 20s are still following the game. Not at the records that we did, Chris, when we were kids. But
there's 41 young blacks out there that like baseball. No, I'm just playing.
But you know what I'm saying, like from my standpoint, yeah.
All right, it is the Odd Couple, Chris and Rob. If you want to weigh in on this conversation,
just a conversation, about the
give us your thoughts. African American numbers in baseball at an all-time low, at least since 1991. And Rob, look, I'd love to see more African Americans playing, but I'm also of the mindset if guys don't want to play, then I'm not. They don't want to play. Fine. I just don't want there to be the obstacles there. If they want to play, I'd like to see them get an opportunity.
Right. There's a big difference.
Right. But if guys just blacks aren't really into playing hockey, fine. Okay. No big deal. If that's what's become a baseball, okay. But I think there's some other issues as well. All right.